We have a problem. Like many of the problems you encounter in life and on the homestead, the solution to this one starts with digging a hole. These are 5 things I regret about leaving the homestead. In late 2019, after nearly a decade on the homestead, I decided to take a job in the city, 12 hours away, commuting 3 weeks on and 1 week off, while Carrie and the kids held down the fort. One of the things I regret most about leaving the homestead was how bad a shape I got into down there in the city. Everything was so much easier. And I had access to a lot more things that were not good for me, like fast food, and I was always so busy doing work and those sorts of things that it was just easier, faster, and I could keep going when I would stop and do things that were not so good for my health. While I was down there, I think I gained fluctuated between 60 and 80 pounds. And when I first arrived down there, I was in the best shape of my life. So now just working back towards it. All right, only 5 feet to go.
Hey, that's about as tall as me.
As
So
soon
whenever
as
you see me like barely peeking over, you'll know we're deep enough.
As soon as you can't climb out of the hole, we're done digging.
Okay.
After a few months of back and forth, the strain of being gone for 3, 4, sometimes 5 weeks at a time became too much, and we decided to get a house in the suburbs and be together. Moving day was March 13th, 2020.
Oh,
In our state,
perfect timing.
that was the day that 2 weeks to flatten the curve became 2 years of brutal lockdowns, panic, and economic uncertainty. Well, we finally got to the end of this hole, which brings me to regret number 2 about leaving the homestead. When we first left the homestead, we had a little bit of debt, and we had some bills, and we had things that we had to take care of. When I got the job that we moved down there for me to have, what we found was it was really good money, but everything was so much more expensive that we were still doing the whole shoestring budget thing. And all it took was 1 month where production was down, the finances were really tight, and we ended up having to use credit cards to make ends meet. That turned into more debt, which turned into more debt, which turned into more debt. So after 3 years of working, making really good money, and paying extremely high amounts of money for everything that we had to consume, where we lived, we ended up in more debt than when we moved down there. And so it's really easy when you're in a situation like we were in, where we were in the city and the game was very different, for you to really get in a hole that you can't really get out of. Life, for the most part, had come to a halt. The parks were closed, the museums were closed, the youth sports leagues, the family activity groups, and social functions were all on hold. The kids, in a new place, with no space to run, had no opportunity to make friends. Everything we'd planned to do was no longer an option. Our wild, adventurous, outdoor kids spent most of their time inside. Regret number 3 is the way leaving the homestead and moving back to the city changed the children. You notice I'm doing this by myself. There was a time when every one of the kids loved doing stuff like this, moving dirt around, I don't know if it's just a age thing or whatever, but as a result of being down in the city and not really being able to do anything because of the lockdown, it's like this kind of stuff just doesn't appeal to them anymore. So certain projects they'll help with, but it used to be, what are you doing, Daddy? What can I do to help? It's going to take a while to kind of get that back going again.
To add just about the right amount of insult to injury, about 6 months into the lockdown, we found out that our home county never shut down a thing. Life went on as usual. Kids played outside, skinned their knees, and lived. Not a day went by that I didn't think about, dream about, or worry about the homestead. I'd be stuck in traffic and laugh about how the closest thing to this I would have to deal with when I was at home was being stuck behind an old farmer's tractor as he drove the highway to get from gate to gate. I would hear a siren off in the distance and think about how a call to the police meant an hour wait, and if the homestead needed defending, it would be defended by me.
My fourth regret about leaving the homestead was that I wasn't here to secure the homestead. We had lived out here long enough to know exactly what happens to properties out here if they appear abandoned. And as a result of that, everything that we had worked a decade to either build or acquire ended up getting stolen. And so a 40-foot fifth wheel that we planned on moving into in the coldest part of February when we moved back up here was gone. The wood stove in our house was gone. Windows were broken. The water tank was, well, they attempted to steal that and ended up just breaking it, but, you know, we fixed that in one of the last videos. And having the knowledge after having all of those things stolen, that if I was here, none of that would have happened. Nobody would have thought to target this property as one to steal from. Sweet.
This may sound funny, but it's been my experience that having too small or too few problems can be just as bad as having too big or too many.
Yay!
Life in the city during this time was dull. There was no adventure. The game we were playing was small, and it was making us small.
Yeah, that ain't coming out. All right. This is how long that piece of leech line's gonna be. That's just how it is.
We were losing sight of what was important. We knew that if we were going to be happy, we needed to play a much bigger game.
So, my fifth and final regret is that when we lived in the city, we didn't have appropriate problems to solve, right? Every problem we had to solve down there was having to do with making more money so that we could pay more bills and get out of debt and do all of these other things. And it's been my experience that when you have little problems, the other little problems you have to make big so that you're not just bored to tears with life. Out here, we'd solve problems that would directly result in an improvement in our survival. Growing more food, putting in a septic tank, doing the things that we needed to do to be able to live a better life. And one of the side effects of having problems that weren't the right problems to be solving was that I would become petty, right? And I'd make a big deal out of smaller things. And I think it was purely out of boredom. And so out here, there's so much to be done that you couldn't possibly be bored unless you tried. And the problems you solve are big problems that have big solutions that you take a win on when you solve them. And when you do, life for the entire family gets better. We didn't have good enough problems to solve, which made life boring and unfulfilling. I like this a lot better.
Every one of those regrets had an unintended benefit. Perspective. It gets hard on the homestead, and it sometimes seems like it's not worth the fight or the struggle.
You can do it.
Now, we know that for us, it is.
I'll tell you what, if anything comes out of that, it's gonna go all over the place.
Over the place.
And that glove will do nothing for you.
Well, it's like any other glove. It gives me peace of mind.
There you go.
So are you ready to go?
I think so. This is gonna be a first try. It's either gonna work great or it's gonna be a catastrophic failure. One of the two things I can promise.
I hope it works great.
I hope it works great too. All right.
When we started this
Black
video,
first.
we had a problem that needed solving. We didn't have thousands of dollars to throw at the problem. We didn't have someone to solve it for us.
Awesome.
Seems to be
All
working.
we could do
All right, now we'll do the rinse.
was pick up a shovel, start digging, cobble together what we could, and now
What an accomplishment this is.
Super is.
I'm so proud of you.
Hey, yay!
Yay!
I never had a doubt. Yeah, so problem solved. Now the kids will just backfill all the trenches and everything else. If you want to see more of our adventures, check out one of these videos here. See you later.